Hear ye, the United States Court for the Western District of Oklahoma is now in session.
The following scenes are based on the sworn testimony given at the trial. The home of Catherine Kelly in Fort Worth, where no doubt the Urschel kidnap plot was first conceived. The first step was the purchase of a machine gun at this pawn shop in Fort Worth, Texas on February 20th, 1933. This is Catherine Kelly, who, according to testimony, purchased this machine gun for $250 cash. The story now picks up the trail of the Kellys on July 22nd at the Stratford, Oklahoma farm of her grandparents, accompanied by Albert Bates. At the noonday meal, Kelly remarked, "There's more than likely to be a kidnapping in Oklahoma City tonight." And sure enough, Kelly was right. That night, from his home in the exclusive residential district, Charles F. Urschel, millionaire oil man of Oklahoma City, was abducted. Through this door, leading to the sun porch, where the Urschels and two friends were playing a final rub of bridge, entered two sinister figures.
Don't move. Don't move or we'll blow your heads off. We want Urschel. Which one is Urschel? Which one is Urschel? Well then, we'll take them both. Don't say a word or go near that telephone or we'll blow your head.
About an hour after identifying themselves, Urschel's friend was released on a lonely road with instructions to keep his mouth shut if he wanted to help Urschel. They then blindfolded Urschel. He was told not to hear or see anything on the trip or they would kill him. What a lonely, secluded spot this is, but the kidnappers did not reckon with the intelligence of their victim and the thoroughness of the United States Bureau of Investigation. They placed their victim in the small room at the right, where he was held captive in the manner shown. He noted the regular daily passage of an airplane. He noted that it rained on a certain day. He heard Armand Shannon's nickname, Potatoes. He heard the name of the rural postman. These clues were followed up later by federal agents with the result that mail plane schedules indicated Paradise, Texas, which was further verified by rainfall records. Investigation in Paradise located the postman, and here they also learned that Armand Shannon's nickname was Potatoes. One of the clever things which Urschel did, and which later aided in the conviction of the kidnappers, was to leave his fingerprints wherever possible. Urschel was allowed to write his first communication, in which he said, "My personal funds are very low, and if the estate funds have to be touched to pay the ransom, just forget about it. Let it go. It will be all right with me." But after reading the note, the kidnappers said,
"No, that won't do. We'll tell you what we want you to write. Now write this. Dear John."
This is E.E. Kirkpatrick, who delivered the $200,000 ransom July 30th in Kansas City to a man later identified as Kelly. Urschel was released at this spot near Norman, Oklahoma. Walking to this barbecue stand, he called a cab to take him home. This list of the serial numbers of the 10,000 $20 bills delivered as ransom furnished the clue which led to the arrest of the first suspects, 3 men in St. Paul, Minnesota, on August 8th. Following clues obtained from the close observations of Urschel, a small army of special agents and peace officers swooped down at daybreak on August 12th on the home of R.G. Boss Shannon near Paradise, Texas, the remote and secluded hideout of the kidnappers. The net closed in on Catherine Kelly's mother, Mrs. Ora Shannon, her husband, Boss Shannon, his son, Armand, and the notorious Harvey Bailey, who was captured while sleeping on a cot in the yard. Bailey was armed with a young arsenal, and on his person, agents found $700 of the Urschel ransom money. Bailey and the Shannons were placed in the Dallas County Jail. And here they are, George and Catherine, at the showdown, an unbeatable pair, until they were called by the aces of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Following close on the heels of the capture of the Kellys in Memphis, federal and local officers acting upon a tip made a midnight visit, September 26th, to the farm of Cass Coleman. Assisted by Cass Coleman, agents proceeded to this old well in the middle of a cotton patch, where they recovered $73,250 of the Urschel ransom money Kelly and Coleman had buried a few days previous. It took them an hour to count it. The money was too hot for Kelly to handle. I wonder how he expected it to cool off in a thermos jug. Here comes Charles F. Urschel, the victim of the world's most astounding kidnap plot. He takes a seat beside his wife. His extreme courage in the face of threats of death is America's challenge to gangland. The trial is over, and the jury has reached a verdict. Thus, Uncle Sam rolled up his sleeves and dealt gangland a swift, decisive blow.
The question before the American people today is whether or not crime will be recognized as an occupation or a profession, or whether the people will enforce the laws of this nation as they are written. So far as this court is concerned, it's his purpose to try to enforce the laws as they are written. It's therefore the judgment of this court that Albert L. Bates be sentenced to the federal penitentiary for the term of his natural life. It's the judgment of this court that Harvey J. Bailey be sentenced to the federal penitentiary for the term of his natural life. It's the judgment of this court that R.G. Shannon be sentenced to the federal penitentiary for the term of his natural life. It's the judgment of this court that Ora L. Shannon be sentenced to the federal penitentiary for the term of her natural life.
1934 was a banner year for the Department of Justice under the leadership of J. Edgar Hoover. In Chicago, Babyface Nelson was shot in a running battle with G-men. Fred Barker and his mother, Ma Barker, died in their Florida bungalow, their bodies riddled with machine gun bullets. The year 1935 found the G-men working at top speed. Many kidnappers were rounded up, among whom was Bruno Richard Hoffman, who died in the electric chair for the kidnapping of the Lindbergh baby. Alvin Karpus, who more than 2 years ago shot his way out of an Atlantic City hotel, was captured in an apartment in New Orleans on May 1st, 1936, by J. Edgar Hoover and his G-men. Quickly following his capture, Harry Campbell, one of Karpus' henchmen, was captured in Toledo, Ohio. Before the papers could get onto the street with this announcement, G-men reported the capture of William Mahon, wanted in the Weyerhaeuser kidnapping. Climaxing a sensational 10-day roundup of the nation's public enemies, on May 11, 1936, the federal agents captured the last of the public enemies, Thomas H. Robinson, Jr., kidnapper of Mrs. Alice Stowe. The alertness of this obscure drug clerk, Lynn Allen, led to Robinson's capture, who often masqueraded as a woman. It was on a fateful morning that he went to the drugstore where Allen was employed, and whose suspicions were so aroused by Robinson's actions that he notified the Pasadena authorities. The G-men were called in, and he was soon traced to this modest little home in Glendale, California, where he was taken without a struggle.
The Last Roundup is a fitting title to this prologue because it epitomizes results of one of the worst chapters in the history of crime in the Southwest, which was brought to a close by the final capture and execution of Raymond Hamilton. The Last Roundup was continued again when a score or more relatives and accomplices of Clyde Barrow and Raymond Hamilton were brought into federal court, where they were given sentences ranging from a few hours to 2 years for harboring criminals. Thus, for the first time, were many people brought to realize that it is the bounden duty of each individual to uphold the law of the land. But the last of the would-be smart guys was still to be rounded up. At this ambuscade in Dallas, luck was still with Raymond Hamilton when his brother Floyd walked up to this window, behind which were concealed 3 officers, and escaped amidst a fusillade of shots with only a minor wound. And Ray escaped from their car under fire that riddled it with bullets from other waiting officers. A few weeks later, he escaped another ambush by officers who were concealed under this bridge near McKinney. The car was again riddled with bullets, but his luck still held. But the last roundup is ended when Hamilton is captured by the forces of Sheriff Smoot Smith of Dallas and the inexorable verdict that crime does not pay is again rendered by fate, as Hamilton is seen here just prior to his last mile.
At this humble little farm home in the Aikens community near Sallisaw, Oklahoma, Pretty Boy Floyd spent most of his childhood days. Pretty Boy Floyd cared little for religion, but attended Sunday school regularly in this little Aiken church, his faith growing weaker as he grew older. At this modest little schoolhouse, Pretty Boy gained his limited education. It was here that he met Ruby Hargrave, whom he later married. They were sweethearts for several years and finally married on March 26, 1924 at Sallisaw, Oklahoma, the county seat of their home county, Sequoia. A year later, a son was born to them. They named him Charles Dempsey Floyd. For 8 months recently, Floyd and his family lived next door to a United States Marshal in Fort Smith, Arkansas, only 22 miles from Sallisaw, Oklahoma. And despite the outlaw's notoriety, the Marshal failed to recognize him. At that time, Floyd used the name of Douglas and posed as a traveling salesman. In this case, his seemingly good conduct made a favorable impression with his neighbors. The Sallisaw State Bank, where in 1932 Floyd and his henchmen staged one of their many robberies. It is reputed that Floyd stood on the sidewalk and talked to his friends while his pals inside emptied the money tills. Evidently, he wanted to show the home folks how a first-class bank robbing job was done. As soon as the money had been collected, he sped into the hills and was lost from sight. The Cookson Hills in eastern Oklahoma have been the hiding place for some of the most desperate criminals of the Southwest. Floyd has been accused of killing 10 or more men in various bank robberies and other run-ins with the law. For one of these murders, he has a price on his head of $1,000 at the age of 26. He is credited with introducing the machine gun as a standard weapon for bank robbing. Officers claim that he and his gang robbed more than 60 banks in 1932, an unequaled record in the world of crime. In his early life, Pretty Boy became known as a bad boy. His first crime was at 18 when he robbed the post office of 350 pennies. This took place at his hometown, Aikens, a few miles from Sallisaw. In 1930, Pretty Boy was captured in Akron, Ohio, and accused of killing a patrolman who had whistled at a passing motorist. He escaped by making a daring leap from a speeding train. This proved his strong nerve as well as his resourcefulness. A year later, 2 police informers were found slain in the Kansas City rooming house, and Floyd and a companion shot it out with the police. Later, he and his aide were cornered in Bowling Green, Ohio, where the aide and 1 police officer were killed. The next we hear of Floyd is the Department of Justice's order for his arrest in connection with the Kansas City Union Station machine gun massacre. In this affray, 4 federal officers and their prisoner were slaughtered. For about 2 years afterwards, Floyd dropped out of the limelight and was unheard of until October 1934, when he was killed by federal and state officers on the Conkle Farm near East Liverpool, Ohio. To this little station, Pretty Boy came back for the last time. The body remained at the funeral home for a short time before being removed to Floyd's mother's home. Crowds of people came to the home to view the body as it lay still in death. Many in the crowd of onlookers were merely curious. For hours, starting early in the morning, automobiles had been going in a steady line to the little cemetery at Aikens. This was the most populous place in Oklahoma on the Sunday that Charles Pretty Boy Floyd was laid to rest beside his father, who also met a violent death. These scenes recall that Pretty Boy Floyd had a premonition that he would not live long. A few months before, he had selected his grave and said to his mother, "I expect to go down soon, with lead perhaps, the sooner the better." Picture the mother's feelings at such a remark from her wayward son. Over this road through the Cookson Hills went thousands of automobiles, trucks and wagons, packed with a motley crowd of the curious. People on horseback galloped through clouds of red dust, and those on foot trudged through the woods for miles and miles to get a final glimpse of the one and only Pretty Boy Floyd. These scenes were secured at great risk of life, being photographed from ambush, treetops, and through windows of vacant houses. The hearse, followed by the mother, wife, and son, was driven under heavy guard in an almost successful attempt to prevent pictures being made. Swiftly and grimly, the procession marches on to the little cemetery, nestled among the drab oak-covered mountains, where once there played amongst his friends a little boy, who later grew up in the world of crime, only to have his life taken as he had taken others. It was Pretty Boy Floyd's last ride.